If I could offer you one tool that took my PDA autistic son's aggressive behaviors from 5 hours of daily meltdowns and destructions to less than 30 minutes a few times a week, would you want it? It's 4 letters, W.A.I.T, and it stands for Why Am I Talking? Okay, because here's what I didn't understand for years. I thought regulation was about saying the right thing, finding the right words to calm him down, to reason with him, to fix what was happening. It's not. So much of regulation isn't words at all. It's energy, it's nervous system cues. And the second you open your mouth to try to manage a meltdown, there's a good chance you've already left the one thing that actually helps. So today I want to show you what I mean and why waiting, not talking, became the single most powerful tool we ever used with my son. So let's begin. So I want to take you back to the thick of it when my son was in the middle of his burnout and the aggressive episodes were happening regularly, sometimes for hours a day. Okay, there's one example that captures this so well, and it's something that will probably sound familiar to a lot of you. Okay, so back then, my son would get incredibly upset by things that had nothing to do with him directly. And one of the biggest ones was my husband. Okay, he needed to control my husband's basic needs of toileting, right? So if my husband did something as simple as go to the bathroom, my son would feel like he had lost control of the situation, and he would come running to find me wherever I was, even if I was right in the middle of work, and he would explode. He'd start banging on the walls, and he'd be desperate for me to go and change his dad, right? Constantly pulling at me, trying to get me to go change his dad, to get him to stop going to the bathroom or doing whatever it was that set my son off. Okay, and here's what I want to walk you through, because I think that this is where so many of us get stuck. And it's where I got stuck for a long time too. Okay, so I had two ways that I would respond to him in that moment. And I used to think one of them was the good version and the other one was the not so good version. But it turns out that neither of those ways worked. And understanding why, it really took me years to understand why. Okay, so the first kind of talking came straight from fight or flight. Okay, I would jump in and I would try to explain things to him like, you're safe, it's okay for daddy to go to the bathroom. I would try to reason with him. I would try to teach him in the moment, say things like, well, it's his body, it's his choice, just like it's your body and your choice. So I would say things like that. And every single time, poof, it would explode even more. Okay, so then I think, okay, let me try to be, calmer about this. Let me say something softer, like, and acknowledge him or validate him, right? Because I do, coaching, so I'm good at validating people. But so I would say things like, seems like this is really hard for you. Or I would say, I'm so sorry you're not feeling good right now. And I want you to notice something in those sentences, because it took me a long time to catch it myself, okay? The word you was all over them. And even though it sounded calm on the surface, it still exploded him just as much. So I remember feeling so exasperated in those moments, thinking, like, here I am, I'm trying to be calm, I'm trying to say the right things, I'm trying to co-regulate him and be the parent who validates him, and say these nice, gentle things. So why the heck isn't it working? Okay, so what I understood much later was that both of those kinds of talking, the reasoning one and the soft one, were coming from the same place. Okay, they were both scripted attempts to regulate him with words, while I myself was not regulated inside. And underneath both of them was the same agenda, okay, whether I wanted to admit it or not. And that agenda was for him to change so that I could stop dealing with what was happening inside of me, right? All the activation and triggering that was happening inside of me. Okay, so that's very common, right? It's the first place we go, fight or flight, sympathetic, trying to control, fix, I must, I do, like fix everyone outside of us so that I don't have to feel this inside. And I eventually realized that the more I opened my mouth, the more that I moved toward him, even the more I simply looked directly at him when he was already escalated, the more he would explode. And what I came to understand was that these were social engagement strategies, right? Like you look at your child, you try to move towards them to help them. Okay. These are the kinds that we are wired to reach for, right? Eye contact, gentle words, closeness, but they weren't coming from an embodied state of safety in me or truly understanding my son's nervous system and what he needed in those moments. They were coming from my own fight or flight, just dressed up as connection. And this is what often happens, right? This is kind of like this functional freeze state that happens where we have all this activation, we clamp down on it, we recruit social engagement behaviors, and we seem like we're being calm and social, but inside we have all this fight flight energy going on, and our kids read that. Okay, so over time, as we really came to understand my son's profile and how his brain was processing all of this, we started implementing the W.A.I.T weight strategy for real. And what that meant for us was really regulating ourselves first, right? So we would stop talking, look away and slightly down instead of at him. And we would stay in proximity so that he still knew we hadn't left him. And then we would keep our hearts open and our body language soft without a single word. Okay, so this became hands down the number one strategy that helped de-escalate my son. And as it became our consistent pattern, something remarkable happened. Okay, he eventually learned to regulate himself and to come back to a regulated state on his own, no words needed. Okay, we went from, and this is a big statistic, my friends. When I tell doctors and professionals about this, like they're shocked, because no other intervention worked. We went from 5 hours of daily rages, from full on destruction in our house, still have holes in our walls we haven't fixed yet. I'm getting around to those. Okay, we went from 5 hours daily rages, full on destruction, to a few minutes, maybe 30 minutes at most, of escalation every few days. And here's the part that still gets me. Okay, the moment that we would falter, the moment we'd lose our own footing and we'd start talking again, he would escalate like boom, blow, big one. And the moment we stopped talking and stayed with just our presence, regulating ourselves, he would regulate. Okay. So it was remarkable to watch over and over again. So I want to be honest with you though here, because people are probably like, that doesn't work for me. I don't talk and my child escalates even more, or it doesn't work. It doesn't calm them down. I want you to understand this, because this did not happen overnight, my friends. Okay. When a child is stuck in those kinds of dysregulation patterns, it can take time, it can take trust, it takes a lot of consistency coming from the parent. So it took the better part of a year for us to become consistent with this. And that was after a few years of real trauma that had built up in us before we got there, okay? But we did it. And to this day, when professionals or doctors ask us what interventions helped him most, this is what I say. Okay, this and my husband and I also becoming more of a team and doing this together consistently. Okay, so let's talk about the deeper pattern and why we default to talking. Okay, because I see this pattern in almost every parent I work with because I lived it for years before I could name it. And when our kids are activated, okay, our own nervous system goes into gear too, right? We are designed to ping with our child's nervous system to feel their activation, and then our own stuff gets triggered and we don't want to feel our own stuff and we go into gear. Okay. And most of us, that shows up as fight or flight, but it can show up as a mild fight or flight. So you don't even notice it, right? So this pull to control, to fix, to manage the situation. And then talking is often the fastest expression of that pull. It feels like we're doing something useful. It feels like it's helping. Okay, but talking in that moment is usually coming from our sympathetic fight flight activation system, okay? Not from a place of calm, grounded presence. So we're not actually offering regulation, we're offering our own fight or flight dressed up as guidance. Okay, and here's the caveat, because I want to be clear about this. If there's a true safety concern, right, like your child is harming themselves or is in some sort of danger, you intervene. If you have to yell stop to get them to freeze in place, and scare the daylights out of their nervous system so that they don't run into the street, like you got to do what you got to do, right? But that's not what this is about, okay? Most of the time, I would say in the thick of a meltdown, there's no safety issue. And especially because if it starts earlier, right, where they just start escalating earlier on, okay, there's just really our own survival system screaming that it needs to do something. And so we talk, we reason, we try to fix it in real time. Okay, and here's the part that took me the longest to see. The very act of chasing. What do I do? What do I do? Searching for the right script, the right strategy, the right words is already a sign that you've left regulation, right? That you're in that fight flight system. Okay, it's not neutral and it's not just responsible. I'm being a responsible parent, right? It's your own sympathetic system looking for something to do, right? Do something, do something, do something. That's a sympathetic system because doing feels safer than just being and tolerating all that's getting triggered inside of you, right? Okay, so take that in for a moment. Doing feels like it's much easier to and safer to be with than just being. Okay. So the question itself is the tell. Okay. If you're deep in what do I do? What do I do? You're not regulated. Okay, my friends, you're not. You're activated and you're looking for an exit, a way to get your child to change. And it backfires almost every time because what we're actually doing is adding our own activated state on top of theirs. Okay, and I want to get specific here because this pattern usually shows up in one of two ways. And I think a lot of you will recognize both of them, right? Just like in my example. So the first is the obvious one, right? It's reasoning with them, it's explaining to them, it's the in the moment teaching. You're safe. Here's why this is happening. Let me explain it to you. Okay, this one is pretty easy to spot as low grade fight or flight. Okay, once you know what to look for, because it's so clearly trying to manage the situation, right? Now, sometimes those words can come from true regulation if that's what your child needs to hear. And if you're truly regulated, it can work. But then when they're really escalated, it often does not. Okay. And then it does come from your fight flight system, which then can fuel their fire even more. Okay. Now, the second one is sneakier. It's the one that trips up so many of the parents I work with and also myself for a long time. And it's that softer talking and saying things like, seems like this is hard for you. I'm so sorry you're not feeling good, right? It sounds regulated. And we've often been taught in many gentle parenting and attachment, like learning about attachment, that this is the way you talk to your child and you validate them, right? It sounds like exactly like the gentle, attuned language that we're taught to reach for. But if we're honest with ourselves in the moment, it's often just as scripted and it's coming from a nervous system that isn't actually settled either. It's just quieter about it. Okay, and underneath, it is often the same agenda as the reasoning version. Okay, I need you to calm down now so I can stop feeling this. Okay, that's the agenda underneath. So there's even something small but worth naming in the language itself, right? So notice how often that softer talking is built around the word you, right? This is hard for you. You're not feeling good. So even gentle language, when it's named at them rather than just being with them, can land as pressure, especially for our PDA autistic kiddos. And it's as pressure as one more thing being directed at them from the outside instead of space being held around them, right? Regulation in yourself emanating out of you and just holding space. Holding space. That's really what this is about, right? Move from wait, why am I talking, to just regulating yourself and holding space of safety, of this energy in the air of safety. Okay, so I'm going to go into a little bit about the nervous system science for both our kids and ourselves, because there's two layers here. Okay. So first, um, let's talk about why this actually works, okay? And from the nervous system perspective. So first, it's what's happening in them. Okay, when a child is activated, especially if they're PDA autistic or highly sensitive, their brain is prioritizing survival, not speech. So verbal processing is expensive. It takes a prefrontal cortex resources that in the moment are being redirected towards managing the threat response. And that's why kids can also lose their words entirely in a meltdown or shutdown, right? We want them to use their words, but they lose their words. And it's not defiance, it's not a choice. The language system has quite literally been taken offline to protect the more urgent stuff, right? So the focus is on the urgent stuff that they're feeling. So when we add a verbal demand, a question, a request to explain themselves, or even like a gentle, let's talk about this, we're asking a system that's already overloaded to do the one thing it has the least capacity for. It doesn't calm them down. It adds pressure. And added pressure on an already overwhelmed nervous system prolongs the very state we're trying to help them out of. Okay, adds fuel to the fire, my friends. Okay, second, what's happening between us? Okay, from a nervous system perspective. Now, this is from polyvagal theory, the science of safety in the nervous system founded by Dr. Stephen Porges. And specifically a term he coined neuroception, which is your nervous system always reading for cues of safety or danger from the people around you. And it's faster than conscious thought, and it's below the level of conscious awareness. So our nervous system is always giving cues, and we're always reading those cues from other people, like tone of voice, posture, facial expression, the body, the body posture, which I mentioned, the energy, all of it. Okay, when we're activated and talking, even if our words are gentle, our body is often broadcasting fight or flight. Okay, and their nervous system picks that up. So two dysregulated systems in the same room feeding each other. Okay, but when we regulate ourselves quietly without words, we become a cue of safety that their nervous system can borrow. And co-regulation isn't something you do for your child. It's something that your calm offers and their body reads. So it's being, it's not doing. Co-regulation is how you're being, and then their nervous system reads that. Okay. Okay. So really the reframe here, the big shift here, right, is the strategy. W.A.I.T. May it become your best friend, okay? Why am I talking? Okay, it isn't really a question about them. It's a question about you. Okay, most of us come into these moments asking, what do I do? What do I do? Right? Every parent comes to me, what do I do? And like we just named, that question itself is a sign we've left regulation. So the shift isn't a better answer to what do I do? It's a different question altogether. It's not what do I do, but it's how do I be? Because most of the time when we're talking in the middle of our child's activation, we're not actually regulating them. We're trying to regulate ourselves. So just take that in for a moment. when you are talking to your child, you're really trying to regulate yourself, okay? Through control, through fixing, through explaining. Because if only you could get them to change, then you could feel okay. So we're using our words the way that they might use a stim. Okay. It's our coping strategy in that moment. We just don't usually see it that way, right? We're attempting to use a strategy to make us feel better if we can change what's happening outside of us. Okay, once you can see that, the whole strategy flips. Unless there's a genuine safety concern, okay, the most powerful thing you can do isn't to find better words. It's to stop talking and turn the doing back onto yourself. Regulate your own body, work with your own fight or flight energy, and trust, like actually trust that as you come back to yourself, you're creating the conditions for them to come back to themselves too. Okay, no fixing, no managing, just allowing what is in you and in them. Okay, and this brings on regulation. Okay, so here's what this gave my son once we got it right. It gave him room, actual room to use the regulation tools he already had, okay, without our fight or flight adding fuel to his. So verbal processing is hard for a lot of kids, even on a calm day. Under activation, it's often the hardest thing we could ask of them. Every question, like every let's talk about it, every attempt to reason is one more demand on a system that has nothing left to give. Okay, when we stopped talking, we stopped adding that demand. Okay, and what we saw over and over was him starting to talk to himself. Okay, he would actually talk himself through things and using strategies that were already his that he couldn't access a moment before when we were pushing words at him. Okay, and he wasn't being managed back to calm. He was finding his own way there, feeling our regulation, and then which allowed him to start to regulate and use his own strategies. Okay, and then in his own time, he'd come back to connect with us, and we were right there waiting for him. Okay, that's the part I want you to sit with. Okay, regulation that comes from inside them instead of being imposed from outside is regulation that actually sticks. Okay, so here's the practice. Here's how to actually do this. Okay, so how do you do this in the moment? Because I know that the pull to talk is strong, and it was for us too for years. Okay, so step one, catch yourself talking, right? Awareness is the first step. That's it. Just notice, become aware. Oh, I'm talking. Okay, no judgment of yourself here, just awareness. Okay, step two, stop mid-sentence. If you have to, just stop. Okay. Step three, turn the doing onto yourself. Okay, if you need something to do and there's fight or flight energy stuck there, we don't want to hold it in, give it something to do. And this is the part that people skip. It's the part that matters most. Your survival system, when it's in fight or flight, it wants to do something. So give it something to do that isn't aimed at your child, okay? Aim it at yourself. Do a shake off. Let the energy discharge, right? Literally, hands, arms, whatever kind of movement helps discharge that fight or flight energy in your own body. Move, breathe, help yourself fully come down. And then step four, come back to presence, okay? Not hovering, not staring them down, just being there, being there in proximity, with your heart open, maybe looking slightly away so it doesn't feel like pressure, just being present. Okay, and then step five, allowing what is. You can actually bring this step in earlier too, right? Right at the beginning, allow that you're triggered, they're triggered while you're regulating yourself. And this is the piece that I teach throughout my whole course, letting go of resistance to what is and allowing it instead. And you and them, not fighting the moment, not trying to speed it up. Okay, and then trust that as you regulate, they will too. Maybe not instantly. Okay, that's the caveat, and it's an important one. This doesn't happen immediately. they need time to come down too. And they're reading your nervous system cues the whole way through. Okay, I remember my son would be like side-eyeing me, watching my nervous system, reading it like a hawk, like literally side-eyeing me, waiting for me to explode. And I would just stay there with my heart open, right? And would and show him that as I was settling, right? That then I was giving him something to track and borrow from gradually, right? So it's not a switch because it's hard for us to switch too, and they're not going to just switch like that. It's a process, and it's often a slower one than our survival brain wants it to be. Okay, so it could take some time for them to fully come down. And so you just give it time, right? Which is the last thing our survival system wants to do, but it's so important. Okay, so looking back now, I understand my son's nervous system so much more than I did in the thick of it. And the single biggest thing that helped him, not the strategies, not the scripts, not the things I said, it was not talking. It was learning to wait. And what's remarkable is that doing this consistently didn't just help him. It was probably the number one tool we ever used to see a real decrease in his behaviors. Because every time we regulated instead of reacting, right, he got the chance to learn regulation through us. No words needed, just our nervous system settling over and over until his learned it could settle too. So if you take one thing from today, let it be this. Next time you feel the pull to talk, just pause and ask yourself, why am I talking? Then wait and trust what happens next. So thank you for being here. If this helped you in any way, please comment. Please share with other parents who may need this messaging too. Take care.